Good afternoon, everybody. I'd like to welcome everyone to the chamber today for Children and Young People Overview and Scrutiny panel. So a bit of housekeeping, fire alarm. A fire practice is not expected. If the alarm sounds, can all present leave the building as quickly as possible by way of the nearest exit to the assembly point in the public square outside Cast beyond the fountain away from the civic office. No roll call can be undertaken. Thank you. If anyone has mobility issues, please wait in the refuge area at the top of the stairs where the emergency evacuation lift is located and use the intercom situated to the left-hand side of the lift doors to call for assistance. Can I ask that everybody have their mobile phones switched to silent mode, please? This meeting will be audio and visually recorded and will be available to view on the Council's website and YouTube channel. Can I ask all those present to use their microphones to ensure the audio can be captured? Any members of the public entering the council chamber are accepting that their images will be retained and broadcast by the council. If there are any public in attendance, it's asking us to not disturb the conduct of the meeting. Right, so I'd like to first of all let young advisors introduce themselves, please.
Hi, I'm Amelia Clark-Allen and I'm a young advisor.
Hi, I'm Sophie Crockett and I'm a young advisor.
Hi, I'm Connie Rushton and I'm a young advisor.
Thank you, I really appreciate you coming today. So first of all, we've got the apologies for absence, and we've got a few apologies. So we've got Rhiannon Nelson, the Director, Children and Families. We've got Councillor Durant, Councillor Moran and Councillor Reid. Next we go to consider the extent, if any, to which the public and press should be excluded from the meeting. And there are no issues on the agenda which would require exclusion of the press and public. And then number 3 on the agenda is declarations of interest. So if anybody does have a declaration of interest, could they please contact Christine Rothwell after the meeting, who can assist you. And 4 is the minutes of the Children and Young People Overview and Scrutiny panel meeting held on the 7th of December 2023. Can we agree that this is a correct record? Is that seconded? Thank you. Public statements. I'm not aware that we have any public statements today. Is that correct? Thank you, Christine. So I think what we'll do is we'll ask people to introduce themselves that would bringing this report to us on children's social care, demand management and neglect. And then I think just, have a bit of time to sort of give us a bit of an overview before we go to questions, if you're comfortable with that. Okay, thank you.
Hi, so I'm Rebecca Wall, I'm the Assistant Director for Children's Social Care. So I coordinated this report, I think, as a result of some of the conversations that we had in developing the Scrutiny work plan about recognising that we have an increase in demand for children's social care intervention, for early help intervention, and we can see that through some of our statistics in relation to when we think a bit about the number of children and families that we're involved with, but also when we think a bit about the budget around children's social care, which I know will be very present in your mind, given that we've looked at moving forward into new budget setting. And one of the things that we often have to think a bit about is what leads some of our changing need, what impacts on the cohort of young people and families that we are becoming more and more involved in. And there's lots of discussion in the airwaves, both locally and nationally, around the impact of neglect. And some of that can be seen in a very negative way in terms of whenever as a safeguarding or early intervention service we look at an area of practice and we focus a lot of our resource within that area, sometimes what we see is that demand swelling. So what we know is that as a local authority, as a strategic partnership, as a safeguarding partnership, as an early help steering group, we are all really minded about the impact that neglect has for children and families. If you look at obviously a lot of the research in this area, neglect and what is defined as neglect is really important to know and understand. And when you look at some of the data set that I've prepared that gives a national picture and then looks at the local picture, I wanted to be able to discuss how we feel neglect is impacting on us here in Doncaster, how that sits within a national picture, and what we're doing to work to achieve and address that. And I'm hoping that, as you see through the report, by setting the national scene, it is a trend, and we've looked at lots of different elements, lots of different stages of the process. So working through where we first become involved with children and families, where sometimes that needs to step into a early help, child in need intervention, where that's stepping into child protection, when that's stepping into looking at caring for children or trying to find legal permanence for them so that they can have a secure forever family. And neglect is an ongoing theme within that. I think as social care and early help and as a partnership, both locally, regionally and nationally, we've all done a lot of work to name neglect. And I think as you look at some of the information about the presenting assessment need, so when things are coming to us at first look and people are looking at what are the factors that influence why we're involved, you will see a high presence of things such as parental factors, such as mental health, domestic abuse. And I think it's really important that is named and recognised as a parental factor. For me, as a social worker, my understanding of when we start to name that parental factor as neglect is when we're starting to see the impact of that parental factor on a child and their development. So for me, that's the biggest understanding that I can give you of the representation of, we don't always name it at the beginning because there isn't always an assumption that because you've got mental health or you use substances or that you're involved in broader activity that we might not necessarily recognise as good, it doesn't mean your children are automatically neglected. And then I think hopefully what you will see through the theme of the report is we talk a lot about deprivation. And it isn't an automatic that if you are struggling financially that you are neglecting your children. And that's a really important dynamic that we need to add into this conversation. Some of the challenges that our families face will be exacerbated by the cost of living, by the impact of COVID, by unemployment. It's not an automatic you are therefore neglecting your children. But I think it creates a real lens, because what we know is that a lot of the families that we come into contact with are already struggling with finances, with employment, with stability in their family setting. And actually then some of those factors peak, they become involved with us, but we don't necessarily need to step into those more acute services. We need to look together about, is this actually neglect or is this a family having a tough time, and what services can we put in place? So that's just a bit of an overview. What you will see, I think, from the data set, if I'm okay to just continue for a couple of minutes, is I think that we work really well in terms of keeping things out of child protection when they don't need to be in child protection. So that we will talk quite a bit, I think, through some of the questions about what we call the help and harm continuum. So children in need is very much for us about working with families where they need help, but that could tip into harm if we don't provide the right support, the right input, the right intervention, the right guidance to that network. And that's what we're really, really mindful of. So we, as Doncaster, I think, have a good early help offer. We have a good targeted early help offer, and we have a good SIN offer. And that means that we are only taking children and families into that child protection arena. Our child protection numbers, I think, are positive for us in terms of the level that they're at. I think we've seen a reduction in the number of children coming into care. In terms of our traditional cohort of children coming into care, we've seen a bit of a different pressure in relation to our unaccompanied asylum seeking children. But for me, some of the measures of where our most acute intervention is, those numbers feel better and steadier. We do have a bit of a surge at the beginning of our system where people are coming to us and asking for assessment. Our contacts are quite high. We have done more strategy meetings, which is the beginning of the child protection investigation process. But I think that's also because we are asking those questions of, is this now neglect? Is this harm that could continue? And I think that's the right question to have. So that surge there, that growth over a period of time, is not unusual. Other areas are also experiencing that growth, but the fact that it doesn't automatically lead to child protection, for me, feels the right place, the right decision. We know we've got more work that we want to do. We know that we've got more work that we want to enable around children that may have been cared for outside of their home because of neglect, but as they grow, their needs change and develop, and parents change and develop. So there are times when we know we want to step back in dynamically and reassess. So I think hopefully the report gives you a bit of a sense of where we sit nationally, what some of those themes are, and gives you some confidence about the areas that we are looking to explore and work on. But happy to close there and see if there's any further questions. Is that all right? Thank you.
Okay, so I'll take the first question, and this is to ask you, how much do our services such as family hubs, Your Place and communities team contribute to families being supported through the cost of living challenges and ensuring as many children remain with their families and prevent possible neglect?
I think obviously this is my colleague's area in terms of Lee Goltz, and we've had some conversations with Alison. We know that a lot of the presenting issues for our families linked to cost of living challenges, and that family hubs and our local solutions group are really actively involved in our communities about providing that information quickly to families and providing a direct input, so it feels that they can come with a challenge, we can signpost, we can guide. Sometimes we're supporting with that form filling. So we feel that there's really good positive links in. We think that we've got really strong partnership working with the Department of Work and Pensions, which I have to say I think is really positive, because that is a challenge in other areas, but I think that's really robust in Doncaster. I think the Supporting Families Fund also has an innovation fund, which allows family to apply and consider access for funds where it will help and provide some immediate resource. That includes things like furniture, school uniforms. So sometimes those things that can just really tip a family, it's there to be able to, without shame or blame, say it's there and available. I think there's lots of support around food banks, vouchers, ensuring that ready access, again, without shame or blame, but recognising that we just need to give families a hand up. And I think there's lots of really good work within the early help coordinators, the lead practitioners. You know, that whole approach to early help is around saying what is available and recognising that in some places a school might provide that extra. If they do, that's great. What can we help out with? So I do think there's quite a positive response at the level where we know if we provide something short and interim, it can make a real difference to a family. And then it's about, have they got the right benefits in place? Have they got the right checks? So we're confident that at the really early help, early access level, that's working really well.
Thank you. So I'll go to Antoinette Drinkhill for the second question. Oh, sorry, Councillor Cox.
Thanks. I just wondered how a location's chosen for a family hub to be sited. What does it have to meet for a family hub to be supplied?
I think there's a long history of family hubs being well established in Doncaster, so I think a number of the sites have already been quite embedded, because when a lot of areas stepped away from family hubs, Doncaster actually maintained those and continued. My understanding is it's usually around need, and it's around what the resource is, and mapping and looking at what has that resource already got. Would a family hub work in that area? And sometimes it's about, is there a location that we can readily develop as well? So there's a multifactorial consideration, and it's really good that we've got some really good ward level data that allows us to look at that. I'm sure is what Lee Goltz, if he was sat here, that leads on that area, would be feeding back. But I'm happy to look at, I don't think there's a specific criteria. I think it's about mapping need, looking at what's already in the area. Would a family hub coordination help that? Is there an opportunity for that to grow out of something that's already there too sometimes? So I don't think there's a rigid criteria. It's looking at where the need is.
Yeah, within our ward, the Finley ward,
Okay.
a family has just been put on Goodison Boulevard, and that's because we've jumped up and down for 8 years about the border issue. We obviously went to look at the one through this panel, and it was fantastic to go and see him in Woodlands, wasn't it? Really good, and doing a great job, which gave me the chance to speak to somebody there about, again, the lack of one within our ward. What we found out with meetings with Nigel and different people, that they seem to think it was based on poverty statistics. So because a review was done of our ward, because it's next to a load of villages that are perceived to be affluent, but within there, there's areas of deprivation. Because the villages were perceived to be okay, it meant that the other half was perceived to be okay as well, when the County 6 part absolutely isn't. So it was me that was showing people how to look at the information and break it down to street level to show where that need is, which I found absolutely amazing, that I was sat there with showing how to find the data. And I mean, I'm thankful now, and I've thanked people in our members' meetings several times for there actually being one there, because it's well attended, it's well used, but nobody's listened to us. Nobody's, you know, you said ward data and us feeding in. We've been feeding in for 8 years, and it's only now, but thank you, and thank you for what you do.
Okay, so can we go to Antoinette Drinkell's question, please?
Afternoon. It's a clarification question, really. So the report states Doncaster's 41 in the ranking for deprivation. Is it a centile, or is it out of the number of local authorities within the country?
I think it depends what report you read, and because there's different ways that number is utilised. I've taken that number from a place of it's 41 out of the broader local authority data set. So some of it's been pulled by the DFE into 41 out of the kind of broader local authorities. But again, just as your colleagues mentioned, the data set is available for breakdown by much smaller ward areas as well. But I put it in to just give a bit of a sense of, we know Doncaster has a level of deprivation, as does South Yorkshire, which I think is really interesting. So it's 41 out of the 152 local authorities. But it is also, I'm going to sensitively say, it is quite out of date, 2019, and it's due for refresh. But again, that comes back to how we use our JSNA, doesn't it? So, sorry, I'll stop.
No, that's fine, thank you. And the other question was around how many of our children and young people are currently experiencing homelessness or are not in affordable, secure housing?
So we have a really robust, for children that are in care, we have a really robust homeless protocol that was developed with St Ledger. And I have to say, it's amazing as far as I'm concerned, in terms of those young people who are particularly 16, 17, at risk in their family. And they have a discussion and connection with us. They go through the homeless protocol, they have an assessment, they are provided with an immediate placement. If St Ledger don't have something within their scope, they come to us as commissioners and we place those children in a supported living, independent living arrangement, and that is supported by St Ledger, which is great. They have an opportunity to consider whether they then want to be considered a looked after young person or whether they want to continue under Section 17. Through the past year, we've had 7 young people access that provision. What we know is that we do have a number of young people who are at times very vulnerable and may not necessarily show up in homelessness until actually they've experienced the sofa surfing, which we would class potentially in that space and place. So we do have a number of children that present, young people that present at that age. And then we do have a small number of young people that were already actively involved in something happens, sometimes linked to bail conditions, so they can't stay with a family member. So we do have small numbers, but I think we have a really robust response when we know about it. Sometimes it's about making sure that we work with organisations so they know the offer is there, so that we can capture those young people earlier. So that's what I can tell you from the data set that we know. I think there's more on there that are unknown that we don't necessarily know and understand as well until they come into children's social care world.
Thank you. Can I just clarify? So when in these placements, are they supported in terms of other people going in and supporting, not necessarily being with them all the time or supervising them, but actually supporting them within that environment?
Yeah, so when I discuss a semi-deported living situation, there'll always be tenancy support. Some of that might be that comes in and visits them, depending on their level of need and assessment. So there might be some young people that are 17 that just need a bridging space, but actually they're quite independent. We'll always come with some offer of support, but what we tend to do is go quite high support initially. We've got a really clear definition between what a young person might need that support and when that tips into care, because again, some of our young people are exceptionally vulnerable, so we make that assessment really clearly. Some of our young people, that could be actually they have sleeping staff still in that setting, in that arena. It could be that they're accessing something like the foyer, which is a Doncaster version, for example, which is a group living. So they do have support, but it's not one-to-one support. It's somebody checking in, somebody that's around and that can support. So yes, we'd never leave a young person vulnerable. It's always about getting them ready to be in that place of being alone in a property, which is a little daunting, isn't it, always?
Yeah. How confident are you that all these properties that people, vulnerable people are going in, are safe and decent properties?
In terms of looked after young people or young people that we're responsible for or that we are involved in on a Section 17 basis, which children need because we can still provide accommodation, we have a really clear understanding that we've got a commissioning team who will do what we call quality assurance checks. So we're really clear that if we're placing a young person or a family in a setting that we're responsible for commissioning, they will go out and do a quality assurance visit, particularly with a new provision or a new arrangement. That's what we always do. If we're supporting our young people into their own accommodation, we always go out and check to make sure that it's safe, and there's a requirement through the framework that we commission when we might purchase a provision for somebody that there is an expectation they're meeting health and safety requirements, for example. I'm not saying that there aren't always some challenges. We did have one young people where we moved them into a property and unfortunately that property had a massive leak. They weren't using it, they didn't realise it until they walked in. It wasn't great, it needed tidying up, but that young person needed some support for that night, so we made what we could safe, went out the next day, because we got some feedback saying, this isn't good enough, what are we doing, how are we supporting? So where we know there's issues, we're really quick to go back and either work with the provider or actually engage with our own housing department and say, what can we do to make this fit, that this should be good enough? We've got quite high standards, I have to say, but there is always sometimes the unknowns. Sometimes if you're supporting young people to go to accommodation quite last minute, that can be a challenge. But we're on it, hopefully.
Councillor. So,
Hi, you say it's called a quality assurance check. So when you do that, is that just on the property, or is that this around, things that could be happening in the area, or?
So the commissioning team have a number of different functions. So when we're getting a provider that sets up with us, ideally we want to go see that provider before they open and we place. That's the aim and ideal. Once we've opened, we always try and go and see a young person within that setting, and we try to be really clear a bit about not just are they meeting the contract and conditions, but what's that young person's experience? Has that placement also got all the stuff that they need or accommodation in terms of from us? So the QA visit's a bit of a critical challenge role for all of us actually, and is about stepping into that space and saying, have we got what we need? And as I say, ideally we want to do it before we place. Sometimes it's not always possible, but then we've got the QA team that will go in. So it's a specific commissioning function, but with quite a broad ranging approach. It's also one part of, because there also should be a social worker visiting or a personal advisor, or we sometimes got St Ledger going out as well. So there's lots of eyes on is the ideal. It's not just, and actually some of those young people still have parental involvement, and those young people's voice is also sought. So we're trying to get the QA from all points.
Do you also liaise with the communities team and with the police of antisocial issues that's going around? Because we know the kids aren't trapped. They're not going to be there all time. And I think most of us would be aware of young people that are in care that are getting involved into things that maybe they don't need to get involved in. So I just wondered if that conversation were there.
So there's two forms of accommodation that we use primarily. So we've got Ofsted registered. For Ofsted registered, you have to do a local area risk assessment. So the provider or we have to do a risk assessment that includes liaising with communities team, with police, so that we can get a real understanding of what that area looks like. That is very much sometimes that provider looking at that risk assessment, and they will maybe sometimes say, we think this is manageable. There are certain areas, and in theory, whenever you are setting up a children's home, for example, you should be contacting the safeguarding business unit, you should be liaising with commissioning and planning, so that we can be saying, actually, this is an area where we would not seek to place children ourselves, and we can give that advice to be able to say there are some areas where there would be vulnerability within that. Ofsted look at that quite rigorously as well. They're looking at, and you're required to input the crime data set for the area as well. So there is quite a tenacious approach. I'm not saying that it's foolproof, because sometimes we do have provisions where we've actively said we might not place in that area because we think there's a high risk of antisocial behaviour or criminal behaviour that we don't want our young people involved in. With semi-independent providers, you may know or may not know that we're going through a process of regulation again with Ofsted. So at one point they could pop up almost and be a lot less focused on where they were, what that environment looked like. That is coming much more to the fore. So as a registered individual and provider, I think we'll see a lot more scrutiny around that. But I have to say that the connection with the communities team here, I think, is really strong. And I think it's about the intelligence, not just what about shows through the criminal offending database, if you like, as we call it. So I think there's work to do that we can continue to give the best advice when people are setting things up. And I think the new regulation of semi-independent allows us to be a bit more influential in that space.
Thank you for that. So now we're going to move on to some questions from Councillor Needham.
Do you need a drink or anything? Because you've talked loads already, haven't you? Hey, can I be all right?
No, I'm all right. I'm just mindful. Sometimes I go lower and lower, don't I? And I talk fast. Okay, I'll project. Sorry.
No, it's fine. I just wanted to, if you wanted a drink first or anything. Okay, so based on the report and its topic of social care demand and neglect, I want to ask a question about social care demand. So Section 8 and 26 both refer to Working Together 23, my favourite document. And also in section 3 of your report, it discusses the expectation is that development of a family help model and practice framework will ensure that thresholds for help and harm are clearly defined and will reduce demand over time. So does that mean that there is an expectation that lead practitioners will be completing section 17 assessments, leaving section 47 investigation to social work colleagues, because that's harm and not help? And would this have an impact on capacity and support a demand in management in terms of neglect? So will it reduce? This is what I'm saying. If Working Together says that more practitioners and people who have a connect with a family can do an assessment, is that a good thing for social workers, and will that reduce demand?
Very, very easy question to respond to there. I think it's a really interesting debate at the moment, isn't it, in terms of, and I say debate because family help isn't well defined necessarily in terms of what that looks like and feels like for each local authority. Working Together sometimes gives a lot of broad interpretation. When we've talked to the DFE and to Ofsted, what they're really clear about is our family help offer needs to be locally defined by our safeguarding partnership, and we need to be really clear about what is in and what is out. What's happened is we've got a new regulatory guidance, haven't we, that hasn't changed the nature of the legislation in which we work under. So actually section 17, it's never been stated it has to be led by a social worker. It's always been the common practice and rule, and the Working Together gives permission to allow you to consider, is a social worker best placed to manage children in need? It's really clear a social worker is best placed to lead on a child protection investigation. It's very clear child protection is the realm of social workers. It also suggests, though, that any assessment process, any Section 17 process should have social worker oversight. So we've got to determine locally, does that mean that we have social worker team managers, but we have lead practitioners, early help, family support workers leading that? Is it that we have social workers allocated to some of the high level children in need that's on the cusp of safeguarding, but actually we have a tiered approach? So that's what we're currently exploring really carefully with our safeguarding partners, as we also look at the multi-agency safeguarding arrangements, which is what we've got to define. What I can commit to is we will have a clear picture by September, because we have to publish. So we're currently working across the partnership, and we'll go out to some stakeholder discussions, including yourselves, about what are we thinking, what we're planning. We think there's some real opportunity to maximise our intervention services and to really get into that help world so that we can reduce the demand on acute services. So we may not see a reduction in demand on children in need, but what we may see is less children in the child protection process and less children in being looked after, and less children, for example, that need permanency via an SGO, or less children that need adoption. That would be our ultimate aim. We want to empower families to care for their children, and we want them to be able to do it safely. We know children thrive best in families, or if they can't be with families, can we empower? The other bit that comes with it is the kinship care policy, which I think I mentioned, which we need to really think a bit about how we evolve our kinship offer so that we can support families to financially but also emotionally support some of our young people that have had really tricky journeys. We're not, finance alone isn't going to cut it, it's about the support, because what we see is that impact. So demand, yes, but it might shift where that work sits. I think we're, as a social work profession, we're really open as to what comes next and how we can do it. And I think early help is in that space. And we're also having a conversation at the minute around communities work and how does that factor in, because Doncaster has really strong community working. So how do we maximise those as well? The role of the lead practitioner in the future, I think, is something that we'll continue to discuss and talk about. And it may be we have a tiered system. We're also being really careful and honest about what are our other local colleagues doing. So we've got a South Yorkshire regional discussion as well about what are people looking at and exploring, so that if we do have families, picking up on your point, we have lots of borders, don't we? How do we help that not feel a jarring experience for families that sometimes go back and forth? We do have families that move around and pop backwards and forwards. Not saying we have to be completely aligned, but if we're working with one police force, we're working with one ICB, and we share our dash obviously with Rotherham, how do we get into that space and place where there's as much alignment as possible? And I think that's been a really positive progress as well over the past 12 months, the South Yorkshire connectivity too.
Thank you. I think working together is a positive, and there are challenges. But obviously, it was dropped a week before Christmas, which didn't really help, because then people at Christmas had come back in January and thought, oh, yes, working together's dropped. And so I guess each local authority will have different challenges, and I welcome the notion that across the patch people are talking to each other, and I think that would be really positive to have kind of connected and joined up assessments, which should help if a family moved. But then challenges also are around if the lead professional is, for example, somebody in health or somebody in a primary school. I visited a local primary school this morning and got my ears burned because, the expectation around early help. And so I guess that is a real challenge, isn't it, to be able to broaden it out? Because everything's relational, isn't it? And if the person's got the relation with the family, the relationship with the family, they should be the best person to offer the help and support, even if that's a community member. But that's proper left field, isn't it? But yeah, I think I welcome it, and thanks for your answers.
Sorry, I just wondered if the people that are going out that would give the support to the families, are they all employed by the authority, or are there some partners that, well, basically, who are the partners?
I think what we're looking at in terms of the lead practitioners is we have a huge amount of work that happens in schools and communities. I think we have some schools that absolutely thrive and are amazing at it. I'm looking at Jane, obviously, my education colleague. We do have some schools that really struggle. But I think it's really tricky for them because as well, just like we've talked a bit about funding and how that works, they need to make decisions about when do they step into doing family support or where do they... So there are some real sensitivities, but I have to say education are by far and most our strongest partner in terms of lead practitioner, and the work that they do to support families because they know it engages children in education is really, really positive, and I think needs to be celebrated. I do think there are challenges because I think we're seeing different needs of children presenting. We had a really interesting strategic event yesterday talking about emerging need, impact of COVID, what that looks like at early years, stage 1, and how can we do some mapping together. In terms of health, we've had a real surge in health visitors being engaged in the lead practitioner role, which I think is really positive as well. I have to say Alison Toombs and early help, the early help part of our system, have done a tremendous amount of work around encouraging people to understand that early help isn't just a service, it's a system and it's an approach. So there's been lots of connection with attendance officers, lots of connection with turnaround, which is early intervention and youth offending, to say the work that you're doing is early help. Let's get it captured. Would you be the lead practitioner? How can we move stuff forward? I think we recognise that there's something that we need to do and grow, and we're going to use the family help vehicle to get us there to say, have we got enough intervention in? Have we got enough in between schools, PAFs and social care? And it might just mean that we need more of PAFs, but again, we might be able to reprofile some of our workforce in the future to be that if we can look at who manages things differently. So there are big partners that lead. We do have RDASH from a CAMS perspective as well, because they're the CAMS provider. They are integral in some of those, but smaller numbers. And then we do have some of the other more discrete partners that are involved, but they tend to be our biggest. School is our biggest, and I think there is an understanding of that continuum of early help, but there's definitely more that we can do. And we talked a bit yesterday, didn't we, about mapping, and we've talked a lot about inclusion and attendance and how that impacts as well on need and demand. So hope that answers the question.
Yeah, it does. I'm just concerned that a lot is put onto schools, and you know, I mean, they're primarily to educate, and parents are there to be parents, but we know that some of them aren't very good at it.
We've talked a lot about how we can maximise points. So obviously there's a lot of early years funding that's been agreed and increased. So it is a bit about talking with early years providers. Now that's much more, what are the things that we need to do to get children school ready? There's a pilot going around getting secondary September ready. So there are lots of points that I think we can work really closely with school to improve that. What I would say is the majority of lead practitioner is done by Doncaster staff, so it's held either by the early help coordinators or by PAFs. And I think that, but I don't want to take away, I agree, schools are amazing in this space. There are some schools that struggle, but there's some schools that really shine a light on what can be done.
Councillor Nevitt.
Thank you, Chair. I'm looking at page 18. There's a graph there of the number of looked after children. The graph for Doncaster goes up and then it goes down, then it goes up, then it goes down again. In relation to neglect and what we're talking about today, why has this gone up, then gone down? Why has it varied so much? What's been done different, and what can be done in the future to continue to lower that amount?
One of the things that's really interesting is sometimes when you look at the themes in relation to children becoming looked after, it's also about the quality of social work practice and intervention. So if you actually look at that and plot that around when Doncaster was classed as good, when it was classed as inadequate, sometimes what you find is the number of looked after children go up after you've had intervention. So when people have come along and said, actually, there are concerns about your practice, people deep dive in, we go in, we sometimes then say to people, tell us everything, we look at everything, and you become a little risk averse, so you see your numbers go up. And I think that's really intriguing. It doesn't always absolutely correlate, there's often a time lag. What I would say for us is that what we're seeing is an emerging challenge around adolescents coming, so the adolescent neglect. So sometimes where we've had children that maybe have had lots of intervention over a number of years, and that's manifesting potentially for older children sometimes when they are missing from home, they're getting involved in criminal activity. Sometimes that can be classed as adolescent neglect because you've got parents that just don't know where to go next and they're struggling, or they've got parental factors and that is sometimes influencing in their ability to manage this stage of teenagehood. So that is an emerging theme. What we're also noting is where a number of years ago we would have looked at a sibling group and said, actually, that older child can stay in this home. It's okay for them. They've got a different need set. I think we critically look much more robustly at what are the outcomes for that child? Should that child stay at home? So where you've got a sibling group of a 2-year-old, a 3-year-old, a 9-year-old and a 12-year-old, where we might have made decisions about actually could those older children remain, I think we're really forensic and we say what's the ability of that family to turn that around? Can we change the positive outcomes? So I think we're really good there. The next step that you find when you get into your next stage of improving is that actually we're working with families to develop their skills. So we've got a really strong families together team which actually works with those children that are on the cusp of coming into care. And we're doing some work about how we can support rehabilitation back, reunification back to family. That service is phenomenal because it is actually getting into those families where they're really wobbling, they do need some support, some teaching, some learning, some modelling together, and it's doing that intensive interaction. And that's got it's a very systemic way of working. It's got family support, it's got social worker intervention, it's got therapeutic intervention, it's got psychological input, and that way of multidisciplinary working, really helps keep some of those children safely in their families where before they might have come in. So for me, it's that ebb and flow. Neglect by itself, to have children come into our care. South Yorkshire Police have done a huge amount of work, as you probably know, about neglect and recognising neglect. They've done a very specialist programme of work over the past 2 years about training their entire workforce in child matters, so a very bespoke piece of work around neglect. What we saw when that happened was we had a bit of a surge of children coming in very quickly on immediate police protection orders. Some of that was right, but some of those children we were able to return home really quickly with a really intensive package of support. So sometimes it does impact on the numbers, but then they come out quite quickly. And then we try to be dynamic. We always try to make sure that we revisit situations, children and families. But neglect in terms of its immediacy and our impact of numbers, it will always be a factor. Our biggest influx at the minute has been sometimes around our unaccompanied asylum seeking children that are coming from our hotel out of area disposals. Neglect still, as you look at the child protection figures, that gives you an idea of what matriculates into looked after. 50% of our children that are on a child protection plan are there for the category of neglect. And that factor does then filter through into what some of our looked after population, the reason they're looked after. So it is still something that impacts and leads to children becoming looked after, but we're trying to be nuanced. We're trying to understand which families have capacity to be in that space to change and develop and grow and shift that, and which children we absolutely need to look after because for their family that's a real struggle. The one point I'll make as well is we've got an amazing programme which is the MST CAN. So that again is a therapeutic systemic approach that's nationally recognised. It's actually an international model of really intensive support with families. Starts at where we start to get involved in legal proceedings where we're really worried, but it's particularly around parents that misuse alcohol or substances. And it's an intensive programme that involves lots of therapeutic input. That's had some real success. Over the last 2 years, out of 30 families that have worked on that programme, only 6 of those, out of 30 children, only 6 of those children have ended up coming into our care, which for, if you think they're some of our highest risk, most complex families, because often it is substance misuse, alcohol misuse, domestic abuse, mental health issues all combined, because it's usually quite entrenched, that is a real positive. So we recognise it's a factor, it's an influence, it's the short answer, and we're doing everything that we can to make sure we mitigate the risk, keep families together where we can, but it is still something that leads children to becoming looked after.
Can I just ask, therefore, these numbers don't correlate with the national trend. They're up and down a lot. But I just wondered about the number of social workers, the number of people who, practitioners, that you need to keep developing the service. Is the workload going up or is it going down?
So I think one of the things that we do really, really robustly is we have a performance meeting that's chaired monthly by Rihanna, our DCS, and one of the key things that we look at is workload and caseload. So we have a daily report that we can look at in relation to workload and caseload. I say that because you can have a small number of children, that families that you're involved with, but they can be the ones that keep you going every single day. So numbers don't always equate to complexity is what I'm saying. I think that there have been times in Doncaster where that has been particularly high, and we've had some workforce instability with the number of agency social workers that we've had in place. However, that's why we've made an investment in growing our own, in investing in AYCs, in investing in international recruitment. So I think that we have the right levels at the moment. In terms of our, as I speak this week, we feel that the caseloads are reasonable. We would like them to be a little lower, I'm going to be completely honest, because then we can deliver a better service to families. But at the minute, it feels that we can provide the best that we can with the capacity that we have in a national picture where there are challenges. I think the commitment Doncaster's made to fund the level of agency staff is really important. It's created some stability. Some of them have been with us quite a while, so I think it's really positive. Would I like every social worker to have 2 less children? Yes. Do I think that those 2 less children mean that they don't get a good service? No, I think they still get the good service, but the aspiration, particularly around retaining social workers, is what I would say. If we can retain social workers by giving them the time to spend with families a little bit more, I think that would reap benefits. But I think that's in our scope of offer as we move forward. I think the recruitment is, keep knocking the microphone. I think the recruitment is paying off, and we're going to have some workforce stability in the next 6 to 12 months that I don't think Doncaster's had for the past 2 years. Thank you.
Antoinette?
Thanks. Just 2 comments really. First of all, I think you're right. Consistency and continuity are key. Even if you get less of it, if it's consistent, then actually I think families benefit and young people benefit much more. The second question was really around, because I understand the 2 most difficult areas are the teenage areas and the preschool, kind of the birth to possibly 4 or 5. How are we for health visitors? Because often they are the people who, before children even hit school, are identifying issues and supporting, because I know the numbers aren't necessarily what we would like, are they?
I think I would probably like to link with health colleagues and provide some data set as a robust answer afterwards. I would say I think we've got really good working relationship with health visitors. I think the investment in the family hub as well has brought midwives closer as well, which I think is another really important connection. So I think there's some amazing work happening. There's been some really good feedback about the perinatal pathway as well, which I think is an amazing success around identifying for people really early possible challenges that could lead to us being involved later on. I think I'd need to go away and check out individual health visiting caseloads, because I think we're seeing a really positively step into that lead practitioner, but we know that capacity is a challenge for them as much as it is for us. So is that all right if I do that as a follow-up?
That's great, thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So my questions are around child poverty. If we just work back to that, and the report does suggest that 1 in 5 children are living in poverty in this country currently, and that Doncaster is heading for 1/4 of all children are now living in low-income households. So are we to assume that the geographical variations and vast differences between local authorities show that a larger proportion live in the north, such as Doncaster, as opposed to the south?
I'll be honest, I had to do a little bit of research in preparation for thinking a little bit about this. What I've picked up from that is, if you look at the national data set, a couple of the most deprived areas are actually in the south. So when you look at who is most deprived, but when you look at the spread of deprivation, I think, again, referring back to yourselves about pockets, I think it's very easy, isn't it, within South Yorkshire to be in one area where it feels quite affluent and then to step into another area where that deprivation is really quite apparent. So I think absolutely, Councillor Hempshaw, that there are more areas in the north when you look at it as a spread, but I think it's that pockets. And I think you can look just across the road to our colleagues in Sheffield. You have the extremes, don't you, very much in Sheffield straight away. And there will be areas where that feels the same in Doncaster, I know it does, but they can feel closer together then, can't you? You can literally cross from one street to another and have that impact. So I think it is something really mindfully. I think it's thinking again about how do we map resource. So how do we think not just about the deprivation, but what's already there in place, how people already structure what they have, and what is the gap moving forward. And when I talk to, Leanne, who obviously is the AD for Education, and Lee and Rihanna, that's something that as a system leadership we really recognise we want to get into that space. So it is about recognising what is in that space, not just the deprivation, because often that data is old, isn't it? It's not the most up to date either, and that can change quite quickly. Does that help answer?
Yes, thank you for that. I mean, I did mention that because it does touch on it in paragraph 10, but it didn't sort of delve too deeply. Councillor Cott?
I think there's something that's omitted from here in the conversation that we had, and it is about statistics and mapping. I personally have looked at this data. It's something that I know how to do. Would it be possible to show some data for different wards or different areas, if you like, settlements, because like I've said and like I emphasised within the meetings that I'd had, and you've just nailed it there, that you can cross a road and you've got a completely different set of problems, and we can see it within all our wards. And I think and again you've nailed it, those pockets are being missed out because of where some of the support is. Some people can't access it, and I think it'd be fantastic if we all knew that you knew. Sorry, it's a bit of a back at you, but if we knew that you knew where these pockets are, so then, if you like, in a further meeting we can say, did you know that were there? Because we do. Are you with me?
I think in terms of providing that information, I think we need to look at how we do that at council-wide and have a conversation about what is it that we want to be in that space and place of. As you say, the JSA data is really relevant, but sometimes it becomes how do we use that? So I know obviously we have the locality bases as well. What information is shared in that setting? Is that the place where we want to move it towards? I think it's really interesting. And obviously, I think hopefully from what you've heard us discuss, and Jane obviously giving some assuring nods, it's very much a discussion that we're having at a strategic leadership level. How do we think about our resources in the future? Where do we use that local knowledge that can be really shifting? So how do we get there? I think that's a conversation that we perhaps need to take to ELT and have some exploration around how we do that. But certainly, it's whether we connect yourselves with PIC colleagues and we look at how we get a shared data set or a lens of what we're looking at, because there's a lot of data there, isn't there, that's on ward level. So do we want to pick the indicators that the indicators we're passionate about and we work on first? And that might be the first thing that we do. I'd love to be an expert in all ward data, but obviously I come from a particular lens as well. So I'm particularly interested in one area, which is why I think and I like how your brain works. It's very system-based, isn't it? So I'm looking at it at place. I look at it from a pathway. So it's just how we resonate that together and provide you with that assurance that we understand it and know it, and that we're basing our resource decision and delivery on that. That's the assurance I think you're asking for, isn't it? That we're aware.
It is. Sorry, it is. But I mean, from the localities model, again, I can only really talk about our ward. It doesn't work with the localities model because of the boundary. So we have part in the southern locality and part in the central locality. The central locality we get no feedback from. The central locality bit is what needs the support, which is why I've gone out and jumped up and down a lot. And like I keep emphasising, it's only taken 8 years, but we've got there. But in having the conversations, and yes, you're having the conversations in an executive manner, wouldn't it be worthwhile including us within those conversations as well? Because we've got some data and information that we can share and input. So I mean, it just seems that maybe, you know, you've got information from all of us. You can get that information from us as elected members that obviously understand where we trudge the streets. We know what's going off. But, you know, it might save you time and resource.
As I say, it's something that I'm absolutely happy to have a conversation with my DCS around. I do think that we just need to think about if what you're saying is the vehicle that there isn't quite giving us what we need, is that something that I can also feed back to the AD group that I'm part of, which includes Lee Tillman, which obviously is looking at some of that work moving forward. And I think there are opportunities in the future to absolutely influence. We're starting to think, aren't we, about can we do some focus work around localities? So absolutely, it's a conversation that I want to emerge. I just think I need to be practical about how quickly we can deliver that, because I think the feedback that we need to offer as officers is some of this is working well, some of it is not, and actually people are asking, can we use the data as a vehicle, as a starting point for a discussion about next steps, rather than, as you say, feeling that the decision comes out and is, get where you're coming from. It's just how I can take that back to our system to move that forward.
We have asked quite a while ago for the data regarding wards, settlements and all that, and guess when we will get them, so it allows us more opportunity to scrutinise things better. We've asked them before and we still haven't got it.
I mean, that's a bit wide-ranging what you're saying there, Councillor Hogarth, but I think at the end of this meeting, the plan was to ask if members could be provided with the data, sort of ward by ward, the statistics around deprivation. So can't ask in this meeting for ward data in every area, but because this is what we're doing, this sort of deep dive on particular deprivation, I think would be helpful to us as ward members to have that information to hand. I know you can't necessarily personally provide us with that, but we wanted to put that in sort of at the end, you know, thinking about going forward in the work plan and everything, and if possible, just generally in meetings sort of going forward, the panel have, you know, stressed that they would like to have that a bit more of a deeper look into the ward level rather than, I mean, you know, we don't even get it at locality level, to be honest. We're not even sort of presented with, you know, I mean, we've got a pie chart. I want to celebrate we've got a pie chart in this report, so thank you for that. But, yeah, so, I mean, we do work in localities, North East, you know, and so on, but it could be, especially when you talk about deprivation, it would be really helpful to have that at a ward level. Okay.
It's certainly something that I can go away and have some further conversations around. It wouldn't necessarily, as you say, come from myself, but I think it's around if that's something that you feel is really important. The only point and caveat that I would make is exactly the mention that I've had, which is you as ward councillors may well have a better understanding of what that looks like and feels in the moment for your constituents. Some of this data, because of how it's collated, can be representative of a period. So as long as you understand that as you access it, it's about, if you're saying local council held data set, then I think that's something that's achieved because it's through the JSNA. Yeah.
Councillor Anderson.
Yeah, I just want, for me own, to appease myself really, what do we now class as a low-income family? Because we know most families every now and then miss a bill. I help out the local food bank. There's working families come to that now because of the cost of living and out. So how do we actually define now a low-income family?
I am going to have to say, Councillor Anderson, I'll need to send you that in writing because I think there's a national definition, if that's all right. So I'm quite happy to go away and send it. I'm not going to put it out.
So for schools, schools count the number of children who've got free school meals within their schools, and we do have that data school by school. So some schools in more deprived areas will have higher free school meals. So we've got that information and we can do that school by school for you or ward by ward. One thing that we do know is sometimes there's two schools within a mile of each other and they have very different levels of free school meals.
So I'm quite happy to provide that. I think there's 37 indicators that make up the deprivation index, and I think access to free school meals, for example, is one. But I'll certainly look at what the current national statistic is around a low income and get that through to you. Thank you.
Can I just say, I think, I mean, yeah, that is, it provides a base saying those are sort of in receipt of free school meals, but I think it's something like you've got to earn or have income into your household less than £7,400. So I don't know about anybody else, but I'd class that as super low income, but that's the threshold for free school meals. Councillor Needham's got the next question, thanks.
Thank you. Moving on. Paragraph 24 mentions and discusses ensuring the safety and well-being of children and families in Doncaster. It talks about shared understanding and key themes and trends that impact on demand to ensure safe decision-making. I wondered, could you expand on what is meant by safe decision-making, please?
So in terms of safe decision making, one of the things that you always need to be mindful of is when your demand goes up, does your criteria for what meets a threshold change? And we're really mindful and conscious within Doncaster. We have a lot of check and challenges in place to make sure that we have a true threshold that's reflective of how families access certain services. And that's why we talk about demand. It feels an awful way, doesn't it, to talk about families accessing and being in need. But I think it's a really important consideration to have. When we look at safe decision making, what we're asking is that help and harm continuum. Is this a family that with consent are saying they will access help? Does that help us feel that we can then manage what we might be worried about as harm? Because we're going to have that wraparound, we're going to have that intervention. So for me, safe decision making is very much around, are we applying the threshold that we've got, and are we consistent in that application? And are we ensuring that the demand through the front door isn't skewing that, and that we aren't saying no to a family when actually we should be saying yes, but we've got so much in that we're having to say no. What I'm reassured about is the Ofsted focused inspection said that from their review of our decision making is we understood risk, we step in and we make safe decisions, and we dynamically reassess if we get more information or if that situation changes for that family. So I think that's what I mean by safe decision making, but also making sure that threshold is understood all the way through my service, but that it's also understood across the partnership and with different agencies. So safe decision making is about making sure that if somebody feels worried or concerned, there's an opportunity to explore what that's about, understand why we might be saying, actually, we don't think it's a safeguarding, but if this is offered, we think that would be the right response for this family. And we have escalation processes if people feel, actually, I feel really unsafe about the decision that you've made. So for me, it's a process, it's about threshold, but it's also about making sure that we're open to check and challenge and changing risk and need. Is that helpful?
Yeah, thank you. So does that mean then that practitioners practice safe decision making as well as SLT and DLT, and because it's a continuum, it goes through everybody, doesn't it? It's like it's everybody's responsibility. So how is that checked then? How is that uniformly decided that a safe decision making is made?
So what we have is a really robust oversight in terms of team manager support and supervision. We also have advanced practitioners in the team so that we can support peer discussion and conversation. For our newly qualified staff in terms of our AYSC cohort for social workers, they've got a lot of support, and they have a mentor through the typology scheme where they can explore and discuss some of the challenges that decision making might pose so that they can be given good advice. They have smaller caseloads, for example, to make sure that they're able to weigh up risks and balances and provide and understand that continuum of need and threshold and how risk can change. So supervision is really, really key. We see good supervision, and we know we need to improve the timeliness sometimes of our supervision. We've revisited our supervision policy so that we capture that in the assessment team sometimes it might not be supervision, it's team manager oversight, sign off the assessment. So no child is closed, no family is ceased working within in social work without team manager oversight. And what we also do again is open up critically that it isn't just a social care decision, it should be a partnership decision, because we're never just solely working us. And if there is an issue or challenge, we have a professional escalation hotline, if you like, that goes into our MASH, or that goes up to service managers to say, we're not sure about this decision making, we feel unsafe. So we try to be really robust. And then from a learning point of view, we do regular audit and moderation and dip sampling. If we see practice there that we're worried about, we pick that up immediately, go back, because there's always some slippage. I would like to say 100% of the time we get the outcome right. I think you just need to look at the national press and say, the world that we work in, sometimes getting the right decision is really tricky. Sometimes you're looking at the best decision based on the information that you know. But I think we've got lots of checks and measures and balances in place. And if we see a theme of practice, which we want to say, are we being a little risk averse in this space, or are we not thinking this through? We pick that up and we do some training and learning and development to make sure that we strengthen that decision making.
Thank you. And of course, sometimes an audit process can be themed, can't it, as well? So I like an issue across the whole service. Thank you for that. I've moving on to my other question quickly. And this is about, so it's paragraph 40, and it discusses workforce in terms of recruitment and retention. And I'm pleased to hear about your positive stuff around staffing and development, and that's quite positive. However, there's a number of vacancies, as always, and I guess most organisations hold a number of vacancies, and it's a fluid kind of thing. But in terms of retention, I wondered if the voice of the employees who were leaving was recorded, and if any patterns were picked up to change processes to therefore aid retention?
So our staff leaving from a children's social care perspective is reduced dramatically, so that we do not have many social work leavers in the same space and place as we probably had 2 years ago. What we are finding is the vast majority of social workers leave us because they're progressing, but they're not necessarily progressing with us. So we're really committed to looking at a training learning needs matrix, and we've developed a progression panel, which is as much about a CPD progression discussion for staff that are looking to step up from a level 2 social worker to a level 3 social worker. And what we're using that opportunity is to give some really positive feedback, to celebrate and go, where do you see yourself next? And it might be that they're not going to be a social worker, they might want to go and do something that's less field work, but we would rather keep that homegrown talent ourselves. So we're absolutely, and the feedback from progression panel is they found that really, really positive. And we've had 2 people that have taken an up-step progression where they'd said before, I wouldn't have done that if I hadn't gone to progression panel. Because it's not just their manager saying you should go for it, it's somebody that's a bit more external. It's chaired by our principal social worker. So it's really, really positive. I think we do have around 50 agency workers at the moment. We have about 6 or 7 that want to convert and stay with us, which I think is a good sign that your culture's feeling better too. So I think we've got some really positive indicators and progress. I think in MASH, I've got 1 agency social worker and they're covering maternity. That's a little bit unheard of. We've got some work to do in assessment team. We have a couple of we've got 1 locality area that's a little vulnerable, and we've noted that some of those staff felt they followed a manager, if that makes sense. So a manager went, so we had a couple of staff follow, which is again not unusual when you change who leads a team. But we think that the retention's got much better. We've had a couple of people as well that have said we want to leave. They've had really positive discussions with a senior leader, and they've withdrawn the notice. Now I'm going to be really honest, I've not heard of people withdrawing their notice very often. That's happened twice, so that shows good resolution, doesn't it? And they've not changed team, they're in the same team, but we've sorted that, and I think that's really positive. So there were some bright sparks. I'm not saying that it's fixed, we still have 50 agency staff, but we made a commitment that when we brought AYSEs in, we would keep those agency staff until those AYSEs are ready to take their next step. That is burgeoning in May, so we will see a reduction in agency staff, I think in April, May, June.
Thank you, that's very positive and reassuring, and I'm really happy to hear that. Thank you.
Thank you for that. So the report mentions that we have 237 care leavers. I'm not sure if that is just today or is that this year, but just sort of touching on the chance that we got to speak with care leavers, and I think it went out to the whole panel, but I can remember Councillor Anderson was there with me, and we both remarked that the theme seemed to be that the care leavers felt that, I don't know if they called them caseworkers or key workers, but the people that check in on them and, you know, they're starting out their life with their independent living, they felt that they didn't see them enough. I don't know if it was something like once every 8 weeks or something. So just wondering if has that increased at all?
So some of our young people have a variety of support when they hit that care leaver stage. So, forgive me, depending on their criteria, there's a set visiting pattern in relation to when they should be in touch, when they should have contact, when they should have a visit. And I think some young people find the transition from having a social worker and a PA to then having a PA and a different support network in place via their accommodation provision a little jarring. So what we've done is, I know that you might remember that we were successful in the Staying Close DFE bid. So through that Staying Close DFE bid, we've recruited 2 further personal advisors, which is the people that directly engage with care leavers, so that we can make sure that the care leavers' caseloads feel better, and that we can invest in making sure that there's a right level of contact that suits that young person. A big part of that PA role is helping that young person start to transition into, as an adult, what are the other support networks. So some of it is modelling, how do you get to your GP by yourself, how do you sort out some of those really knotty issues that we take for granted that as parents we may do for our children. How do we support them in that place? And how do we also linking with other agencies. So one of the biggest successes we've had with our care leavers is having a DWP drop-in at the colonnades. They say that's the best thing ever because it's somewhere they feel safe and comfortable, but they've got that direct access to somebody that understands their pathway without needing to say, I'm a care leaver and I might struggle with this process a little bit. So yes, we're looking at can we decrease PA caseloads to provide a better level of, a more responsive level of contact that might be a little bit more proactive, but also how are we linking in with the agencies that if we help how they engage with our young people, that will feel better too, so that they are less reliant on their PA to the level that, as I say, it ebbs and flows, doesn't it, how much you need that support and how responsive that is. And if we know that we've got better access to other services, they're not needing their PA to negotiate that for them in the same way. So that's the bit that we're trying to do, which is a multifactorial support. So maximise pathways for care leavers to make sure that they do get the recognition they might need a bit more support, but also that the PAs can visit and be more engaged, but that we can still manage that for the cohort of care leavers that we've got.
But just trying to, you know, get down to the nitty-gritty, if you like. I can understand what you're saying. It might be on individual needs. So, not, you know, all care leavers are different. They all have different level of need. But isn't there just sort of like a base level of how often would that, you're calling it a PA, visit them in their independent living situation? Because that's what we were told. They only sort of visit them every 8 weeks and they stayed about 10 minutes. And they all, I don't know if you can remember, Councillor Anderson, but they all seem to, you know, be saying the same things, that they really would like more contact with the PA. Yeah, because it were literally about 10 minutes sometimes.
I think you've heard some voices, and I think it might be really useful for us in the future to think a bit about how we can share the broader experience in terms of PA visits. 8 weeks is the keep in touch rate, so that's what we're required to do. I think some young people really value a home visit. Some young people really struggle with a home visit and want contact in a different way. I think there's something as well about us being really clear about expectations about how often they will visit and be in touch, and being clear about what roles there is to support and what other resources. Because sometimes I think our young people move to the PA when they feel frustrated that housing application is struggling, but we've built in that we'll have a designated St Ledger worker that can be that connection again through staying close. So we need to arm our young people with, this is your PA, they can help you get through some of those barriers, but there's also some really good people that are in place to help you, and it's not always down to PA. And some young people will self-serve that really well. Some young people will absolutely need a higher level of PA visiting and intervention, and the service tries to do that. It also has a duty officer always on, it has a duty approach and drop in, so there's always somebody there. I think it's about how much we can work with our young people to say, you absolutely need us now, we're here, but actually how do we build for the future so that you can start to navigate some of this yourselves. But the timing, 10 minutes isn't appropriate. What I would say is every PA will balance that based on the messages and the impact and the read that they're getting from the young person. It's very much about, young adult. It's very much about that. We went back and we checked out what that experience looked like and felt like, and what the PA was able to articulate in some of those circumstances is, at times that's as much time as they want to give me, but on reflection, it might well be they only came for 10 minutes and actually I needed them for more. Sometimes some of our adults don't feel able to articulate that well, so our push back to the PAs is, what are the messages that you're getting? Are they ringing you up at other times? Are you getting back into that space? It's not perfect, and it's something we'll continue to develop. Nev Brown, who is our service manager, is really passionate about making sure that young people feel supported. And every time we hear that feedback of, it's not often enough and it's too short, we go back and say, can you check this out? Can you make sure this young person's getting the support that they need?
And also, what are we doing to address sort of isolation and loneliness? Because a lot of care leavers are placed away from family and friends. And I've heard in various meetings the sort of problem with some have no internet access and they're not able to afford a phone, so that makes them even more isolated. So, you know, I mean, I've put on my questionnaire, but just thinking, you know, on my feet, wouldn't it be good to get a big company, a provider, to maybe sponsor the council and the care leavers to provide that, even if it's just for the first 6 months to a year of them leaving.
So I'm just checking my notes because that's what we've done. So we've linked in with a company and they've agreed to provide 50 SIM cards. So not all of our care leavers are in the space where they need us to provide it for them. We always consider it as part of their pathway plan and their development. And if a young person's struggling, a young adult, we would always be in that space where we would look to provide a temporary measure and work with them on how can we get you to a place where this might be something you can afford if it's a priority. So at the minute we're working through this pilot and we're going to measure the impact that has for those 50 young adults that are able to access that. The other bit that I know is we've done some work around leisure passes, so we do have care leavers can access all of the leisure activities locally. We've agreed that for 12 months. And again, the only thing we've asked of those young adults is, can you tell us, if you access it, what the impact is for your well-being, so that we can go back to broader colleagues and say, actually, is this something that we need to fund on a more regular basis moving forward, because it has a benefit on providing an activity that stimulates people, they can do it socially. So for those that don't like the gym, there was agreement that they could transfer that to the swimming or even to the ice skating, which was really good. And I know that the Leaving Care team have particularly looked at putting on some groups, to help access young people go to the gym, because it can feel a bit scary, can't it? So trying to create some social connection through that activity. The other bit is the quarterly question that the young people are focusing on at the minute is kind of combining two of the pledges, which is be responsive to me, be there for me, and kind of bear me in mind. And they're particularly looking at emotional well-being, mental health, and I think loneliness will shine through some of that again. So really trying to push ourselves to be proactive in how are we supporting some of that. Because we know it's a challenge for adults, don't we? It's as much a journey into adulthood, even more so.
Councillor Anderson?
Just when you mentioned BT phones, I thought of something. So how easy is it for a young care leaver to access someone on the phone? Can they get straight through to someone? I think they did mention that then, but I just need refreshing on that. That's okay.
In terms of their PA, they're allocated a PA, but there's always a daily duty service and there's always a daily drop-in. So if young people want to be able to get some advice on something that's really quick, they will be able to help them and signpost them. If they live out of area, they are able to contact the area in which they live, and there's always an arrangement that if there's something that we would need to reimburse, we would do that. One of the big challenges that we have and that we know is we would like young adults to be more local, because we get better support networks, we can make sure they get the accommodation, we hope that they're connected to their networks, but because some of our young people have lived out of area for years, their support network might be in Lincolnshire, so how do we bridge that gap? But they are entitled to access that local duty and to have that PA involvement, even though they live at distance. So it's really good. So I think that there is good connectivity, but like anything else in the world, particularly that I find in social care, is there can be challenges sometimes getting through, and we just need to keep going back and hearing young people and saying, how are we getting back to young people? I think messaging and WhatsApp is great too. And I think as a council, we've stepped into that space because some of our young adults, prefer that method of communication too. So we're trying to break down barriers. And I think we just need to keep listening and going back and checking and make sure we're being responsive and we're getting back to young people as soon as we can if they can't get through to somebody on the duty or their PA is not in. Some young people, adults, will always prefer talking to their PA because they've got a relationship base and they don't then have to explain what they need. They can just, again, without shame and blame, sometimes say, I need support with this. That's a huge step, isn't it? To say to somebody on duty that you don't know, I think sometimes creates a barrier for them. So, yes. Is that all right?
Sorry, I was just going to ask, what are the ways you're going around signposting these resources? They sound really positive, but how are your young adults being signposted to these resources? What other ways are there? Like, do they know that these are available?
So we have, I'm losing my words now. So we have an interactive local offer. So the broad things are available on the local offer. It's something that we want to review, and it's something that we try to keep up to date with real regularity. The main point of contact is very often the PAs. So the PAs linking and connecting with their young people, sometimes sending newsletters, so making sure that they feel involved. What we sometimes find is that some young people are very involved in those experiences, and some young adults we need to actively reach out to and ensure that they are participating. We try to keep things quite social as well where possible. So there is a care leavers football team, for example. So trying to find different ways to help people come together, create a network, but also be able to have some of those conversations because it feels natural. So I think there's always opportunities that we can look at. We used to have an app, but it didn't always work as well, and continuing it. But it's something that we're revisiting to say, is there something else that we could make that would feel more accessible and again might break down a barrier?
Thank you. So you said there's 50 SIM cards. Are they all being used at the moment? Do you know? Because you said that 237 care leavers. Is that this year or?
So it was in the last reporting month, Councillor Hempshaw. So that's where that's what we tend to do. We measure usually in the validated performance month. So I need to go away and check how many are being used. I would imagine there's a reasonable uptake. The bit that I need to highlight as well is that some of our care leavers within that cohort are in employment. Some young people are accessing training and bursaries and different opportunities. So not everybody necessarily has the same struggle. Some actually get really good support still from their families, so they're topping them up. So we've started with 50 to see what the uptake is. But if we find that there's a greater demand, then absolutely we'll look at it. And we want to create equity. So it is about publicising this is what is here. So there isn't an assumption that because you've got a connection with family, they're going to fund it for you. It's done through the pathway plan. So that assessment holistically of their need, which is very much about talking with them, more so that in any other stage of social care involvement, the pathway plan is developed with that young person and adult about what they need. And we try to be bespoke in what we offer. And if we're finding that we've used all 50 and we need an extra 10, then we'll be funding that through the leaving care budget as far as I'm concerned. We don't want anybody to feel there's a cap. We're just looking at starting with numbers to see if they're taken up.
I know I keep going on about this, but over what period of time is this 237 care leavers? I mean, I know once they have their 18th birthday, that's when they then become a care leaver, is that correct? Literally on their birthday. So is that 237 just over the past year? Or, do they all turn 18 on the same day? Do you know what I mean?
So that's 237 as of the end of January. So on a certain date in January, that was how many care leavers we had. So that's what we tend to do. We count at the end of the month. So each month there might be a slight fluctuation. So once you move into the care leaving cohort, you're there up to 21. And then we have a broader offer from 21 to 25. So you can actually be within that cohort of care leaving for quite a period of time. And we do have ebb and flow. And there's different elements of eligibility in relation to care leaver. So you do get different statuses, and that impacts on sometimes the level of support. But that's because it's more open to whether they want to access that support.
I think, I don't know if Councillor Anderson can remember, I'm just going to mention this. Quite a few did say that they actually dread their 18th birthday, which really took us aback, didn't it, really? Because they knew that's when everything was going to change and they'd have all this to contend with. But I know that's not the case, I'm sure it's not the case for all care leavers, but it was quite sad to hear that. So if we move on then, we've now got a question from Councillor Cox.
Thank you. The report states the number of referrals to CSC. Can you put that into words for me, please, because I'm thick? Has increased since COVID, with professionals repeatedly referring to access support instead of a family lead practitioner coordinating this. What are the reasons for this, and how is it being reduced? I think you've addressed some of it anyway.
One of the bellwethers that we look at in children's social care about whether we're being effective in the service that we deliver is our re-referral rate. But at the minute, what we know in Doncaster is our re-referral rate counts everything. So it counts a family that are coming back in for early help to top up because they just need a bit of extra support, because we've designed a front door where everything comes into that front door. So what we're currently doing is looking at what are the cause of the re-referrals, are the early help top-ups, Are they where actually people are coming back with the same presenting issue and actually we need to go, did we get the intervention right? What we know is a number of our re-referrals linked to some of the things that we talk about, linked to neglect and linked to domestic abuse. So what we often find, and I'm probably preaching to the converted, is within domestic abuse we see families that sometimes cycle in and cycle through. And what we're being really firm and clear about within our services, did we get our intervention right? Did we have a robust support network for that family to step down? But actually also we work with complex families and complex lives. Sometimes we might have worked with them to support reducing the risk of domestic abuse, but something else happens as a bereavement, and actually what we see now is a presenting issue in relation to substance misuse or alcohol, or actually they're just really struggling with getting the kid to school because that's had an emotional impact for them. So we're doing a really, really intensive focus on re-referrals because we want that to reduce in a positive way. But given that re-referral rate looks at the last 12 months of practice, it takes time for that to have impact and evidence. So some of that is, are we getting professionals sometimes coming back to us because they don't feel comfortable with the lead practitioner role and they feel that there needs a high level of intervention? Have they done a shared assessment, for example, that early help assessment? Have we maximised that early help offer is sometimes what we're saying. Sometimes what we've got as well is early help and children in need is done in the world of consent. So sometimes what we'll find is we do have some families that come to us with a presenting level of need. We offer them some support and intervention and we say, actually, we need your consent to do this. And they'll go, no then. Thank you very much, but no. And they'll step back. But then sometimes that, and it's particularly around parenting as well at the minute, but parenting where we've seen some of their parental factors, they don't necessarily want social care involved. They don't really want early help involved sometimes. But what we want to be able to do is recognise when does that cumulative harm tip into harm rather than help. So we use the re-referral rate as a bellwether. It is higher than we would like it to be. And I just want to offer you that assurance that as a system we're working at, do professionals understand that threshold well? Are we getting the services pitched at the right level for our families? And when social care are involved, are we getting the intervention right the first time? Because that's what we'd like to do. But also then be realistic about, we think that this re-referral rate is fair because we work with complex families and we work with complex lives, and some of them will come back in. Because children's social care is very different to what it might have been 15 years ago, where you might continue to work with the family for a really long period of time and you're kind of topping them up. But actually, we don't have that resource in the world anymore. And actually, we're asking, how does that family around the child and that team around that child be a watching eye for us? That as they start to tip, we can go back in with an intervention and support. Because if we do all of that ongoing support forever, that's a difficult message to a family too, isn't it? If you need us there all the time. A lot of it's reframing success. So it's a bellwether for us, and I hope in the future to be able to report back that that's positively, safely reduced.
Can I just, I mean, yeah, I get it, and then there'll be a data lag anyway, won't there? But I mean, I get it as well with people with complex lives having to consent, and that in lots of things is, yes, they've got a right to say yes and no, but from a professional perspective, you know that they need that support. There's probably a reason why they say no, and just going to what social workers and when somebody were going to come out and see a family years ago, it was, my kids have gone.
Yeah.
And how do you get that over now, saying that, no, we're trying to help you? Because that feeling's still there within communities. They're terrified.
I think being a social worker is an absolute privilege, but I'm very aware that as a social worker, I carry a lot of power by my title. I like to introduce myself, and always did, to my families, that if I can't help your family stay together, I've failed in my job. And I think hearing that narrative and understanding that purpose of intervention, being realistic about outcomes is really important. So saying, you will never drink again, it is not a sensible outcome, is it? We will help you manage alcohol safely. We will give you good role models. If you're blipping, we will help you work with your family support network so that you can do that and it doesn't impact on your child. But there are tipping points. Again, if you go back to our Ofsted Focus visit, it challenged us about how we looked at cumulative harm. So lots of small things where we might be seeking consent, but that we needed to invest more in pulling that together in an assessment and looking at the lived experience of the child. I think we've done a lot of that over the past 12 months. It's an area that we still want to develop, but it is about thinking, when do we override consent? And that's actually the principle of the MASH. So the MASH is a very clear function. It's a multi-agency safeguarding hub, which is where we get information in and parents are going, we don't consent. We make a professional decision about, do we override their consent? Because we need to know more information to decide, is this help or harm? So we've got the mechanisms. What I'm saying to you is I think we're getting better at practice, but there's still work to do to be in that place. And that's my really honest review.
It's something that we do hear quite a lot. We are getting better. And we hear it in lots of different things. We are getting better. And at what point, the issues that we have are issues that we've had for decades and decades and decades. And we've heard over, we are getting better. I mean, I believe, honestly, that it is better than it was. But at what point are we going to say, I mean, we're never going to get there. We're never going to get where everything's 100% right, because it's just nature of people. But where are we going to get to a point where we're comfortable with where we are?
I think there's bellwethers, isn't there, in terms of what's happening. So from our audit activity, we're able to confidently say that we've moved from being RI to where RI looking up at good. So that requires improvement up to good. Our audit work is telling us within social care, within early help, and I know education are also using a similar audit mechanism looking through the lens of SEN, that actually when we're involved, we improve outcomes. That's what we're trying to look at. So it may be that we always have complex lives and complex problems, but we're getting better at improving outcomes. And I think that's the bit that we're trying to look at for the families that we're involved in, that we're better at outcomes, that we're clear about when we should be involved and shouldn't be, and that's really well understood across the partnership and our communities. The bit is we're always on shifting sands, aren't we? So I think we're better looking up at good. I think we are in a place where we want to provide outstanding outcomes for our children, and sometimes that might be that they can't be with their family. So that complexity may still exist in the community and be very visible, but then we need to be confident that we're providing the best care, the best support, and that is improving that child's lived experience. So that's what I would say. I am always looking for an extra nudge. So I'm always in that space of, like you say, what's pragmatic, what's realistic. I think we recognise that there are still some elements of our practice that we want to continue to develop. I think we've moved away from improve all the time. We are now in development because we're embedding what the changes we've started to make.
Thank you. Question from Antoinette.
Thanks, and I'll just preface the question with the fact that obviously it's a moral imperative to look after children who are unaccompanied asylum seekers. However, the numbers have increased significantly. Do we get funding for these children?
We do. There's a particular funding breakdown that I'll provide in writing if that's okay, because it's pounds and pence. So what we've found is that if they come through the National Transfer Scheme, there's a designated amount because they're assessed as children and we've accepted them as part of our cohort, if you like. So there's a South Yorkshire regional agreed level of intake as to what you will take in relation to national transfer. We then have children that come and arrive as spontaneous arrivals, we call them. And then we have young people who are placed in adult accommodation. They are assessed as adults by the Home Office or through the assessment centre that they've come through. And they come to us and say, actually, we're not an adult, we're a child. And what we've seen particularly in Doncaster is a real rise in the presentation from hotels, and they tend to come in groups. And we had a particular surge after the government decision to double up. We had over 20 in a very short space of time following that decision. It is a challenge for most local authorities, I have to say, in terms of that current challenge. We do get a slightly different level of funding for spontaneous arrivals, but what's really interesting is that the Home Office agreed to pay us the NTS rate for those adult presentation, hotel to adult hotel child, which we age assess. We don't automatically go, yes, we're going to accept you. We do a thorough Merton age assessment. So we are getting the funding. The challenge that we've got is linked to the placement conversation, which is placements are exponentially far more expensive. And when you've got a surge of young people that you need to place in semi-independent living accommodation, if you can imagine if we've had a surge of 20 in over a space of 2 months, that's massive to try and place them locally and to try and place them in the right accommodation. I think the regulation will help us moving forward, but we've seen a rise in the cost of semi-independent living settings probably go from an average of £900 to £1,200 3 years ago. Some of the ones we're paying for now are £3,200 per placement. The money we get from the government doesn't touch that. So we do have a funding gap of about, I'll send you the figure through if that's okay, but it is something that we've picked up on a national front. So the DfE have done a piece of work recently and they offered people to have strategic conversations as part of that research and development. So we absolutely stepped into that space. Rihanna Nelson chairs the strategic regional group in relation to unaccompanied asylum seekers. And our challenge and pushback is exactly what has been said. We would like to see the funding improve. We would like to see how we could invest in capital funding potentially to build resource as well. We've entered into a strategic partnership with one really good provider where the costs are really reasonable and they provide excellent quality support. And we've placed some of our unaccompanied asylum seekers with them, but also some of our regular looked after cohort as well. But it creates a surge in the area and it limits some of our young people that we can help be on an independence journey a little earlier, so they don't feel that, oh my gosh, I've got to 18 and everything stops. We can stage and face some of that. So there's some real complexities, but there's a good regional discussion around that as well and push back to the government about what we could do. The other bit is the auxiliary cost as well of having social workers, having PAs linked in, having team managers. So you can imagine we've now got 55 unaccompanied asylum seeking young people with us. If we go back 4 years, you're probably looking at 8. So it's quite a growth area for us. And we want to get it right. We want to provide community for those young people too. And if we place them out of area, it impacts on their housing for the future. So again, it's how do we create a resource local that impacts for them positively too.
I think you're right, speed of increase must be quite difficult to manage. And I think that's the second part of the question is, does the increase in the number of children in this situation equate to the number of unaccompanied asylum seeking children, or is it that we actually have increasing numbers of teenage children who are in this position of requiring placement, or is it both?
We have both. I think what we've done is really take on board some of young people's feedback that they do feel 18 is that point where sometimes their life changes dramatically, and when you're losing your support and you're changing your accommodation in a very short space of time, that's really tough. So we're working with young people. We've got Askham Court opening really soon about offering some supported living that prepares young people for a 12-week programme to then move into their own tenancy. We have the keys to our future project. We have really positive tenancy support and properties where they can have a shared tenancy. Again, that's thinking about cost of living for the future, managing your own property. Single person's really tough, isn't it? So actually, can we get people that live together as young people? Do they want to live together as adults? So some really exciting opportunities. It does create pressure, but I think we've got an amazing partner with St Ledger that always work with us to look at solutions. I think we're quite creative. We've had the investment in Askham Court. We've got some investment in Hatfield Water Park as well. We're doing some work there. So I think there's some really good opportunities. We've got Cantley, which is a really good SILS resource. And we want to talk about, if we do grow that, there's also opportunity there. If we're not using those spaces, we could look at whether other colleagues in South Yorkshire wanted to use those spaces. So we are looking with an eye to continue developing our resource.
I think that's really important, because actually what you're trying to do is to develop resilience and independence in young people rather than just provide everything for them, help them to provide it for themselves. So I think that's positive news.
Just forgive my ignorance, but unaccompanied asylum seeker, are the young people turning up on a train and shouting, "Hey, up I'm here"? And just the other bit is, obviously the unaccompanied asylum seekers, you just mentioned hotels when they were doubling up. We're assuming they don't, the people that have come here for whatever reason have come here because they're seeking sanctuary for whatever reason. They've come with no paperwork. Who's to say how old they are?
So the spontaneous arrivals tend to be the young people that end up at a service station. They've come off the back of a truck. So we have very few spontaneous arrivals. If you're in Hull, for example, they have lots of spontaneous arrivals. So it depends on your situation sometimes. It tends to be motorways, things like that. Sometimes we have a small proportion of young people that have been trafficked into the country as well, and we find them through a criminal investigation. But again, they're small numbers. As I say, our NTS numbers are managed, and they come through in a cohort, and we get those as they come through. Our biggest challenge has been the presentation. I have to say that sometimes the young people do have documentation, so we've robustly gone back to Border Force and the Home Office saying, why has this young person been assessed? There is something that we've unpicked about as they arrive in the assessment centre. Are they desperate to get out of the assessment centre and say what they need to be provided with a hotel? And once they get to the hotel, they get some advice, and people go, you're too young. And we have had some young people where we've looked at them and they said, actually, I'm 15. We go, yeah, we can tell you're 15 quickly. Let's find a foster placement. There are some people where we go, there is no way you are under the age of 21. And the Merton-based age assessment is a really clear, comprehensive tool about the things that we look for. It's supposed to be done by 2 social workers, so it does look at presentation, it looks at physical appearance, it looks at how they talk about their education. It's quite complex. We do a first stage look, and we may provide accommodation on that, but what we might then say is we're going to send this out for a full independent age assessment because we've got questions, and that's what we look at really robustly. I've got an amazing set of social workers that have got brilliant relationships with the Home Office. They were once able to ferret out that somebody was using a fake ID because of the communication that they got, and we were able to assert, no, you're an adult. We do occasionally get a letter that will threaten judicial review, so it is one of the areas that could put us into a judicial review high-risk arrangement, but we work really closely with legal, really closely to look at assessment, and there's a national panel that's been set up to actually help us develop our age assessment work and to look at how we can best be in that place so that if we are challenged, we can be robust and know that there's less risk because we've made the right decision in relation to age. But if you look at the national press, it is something that comes under scrutiny quite a lot because you have to be really careful with your wording, and it's if they look substantially over this age or under this age, it's quite a technical piece of work. But when we did get that surge through, what I have to say is we had tremendous support from our colleagues in Barnsley who actually lent us some social workers, and we did an assessment session and setting. We did some amazing work with Claire Scott and the communities team because obviously they look at the adult asylum seeking, so we could set up translation, transport. It was a really good team effort, and we pulled through some really good decisions through that process. So looking to replicate that as often as we can.
Okay, so my last question is kind of on the same theme, but this is not sort of aimed at asylum seekers, and it might be more a question for Jane with the Equity and Inclusion Head of Service, but it's around, it mentioned in paragraph 37, and I'm asking you if you can comment on whether the independent accommodation settings within communities have experienced adverse reactions from residents. Adverse reactions. So, does this make reducing our resilience on external provision much more challenging? And if so, what are the council doing to promote community cohesion? So what I'm sort of getting at is I know of these places that in certain places in Doncaster where there's that presumption that these young adults that are care leavers, that they're delinquents basically, rather than just care leavers, and they need somewhere to live. So I know that there are, in some areas of Doncaster, these projects have had to be abandoned, basically, because the community around them have sort of, said we don't want this here. So I just wondered what we're doing for that community cohesion to enable us to get these, these young care leavers embedded into communities in the way that they should be.
What I'll probably feedback on is that the 2 most recent developments that we've probably looked at, one was around the Sills development, but the other one was around Skylarks, which is our other residential property. What I would say is that whenever we look at talking about placing young people who are looked after or care leavers. I think there's both a little bit of a tag that goes with them, that there's an assumption sometimes that they're looked after because of their behaviour, because of sometimes how that bubbles out. And I think we know that we've got good counsellor support in terms of having those conversations about, we know we've got a need for resilience in terms of our sufficiency. We know we want to build new settings, and we want to engage with yourselves to make sure we've got it right for the community. We know that sometimes, depending on the price of accommodation, you might have a number of private settings that pop up in a certain area, for example. So we want to make sure that we work as closely as we can with yourselves when we're developing, but also when those things are going through planning, for example, so that we have good conversations with communities early. So for me, it's all about engagement. We want to place our young people and our young adults in the best areas, because that's what we'd want to do for our own, isn't it? So that's our aim and aspiration. But how we manage those relationships and with communities is crucial. So for me, it's meeting the residential manager, meeting the person that runs that setting, talking about what the aim of it is, talking about the needs of the young people, making sure that with the community in which they live, they can feel a part of it, that they're not ostracised, but also that if there are issues that bubble, car parking's always one that bubbles, because we've got staff going and staying, and I'm always looking in my street to see who's parking on front of me, because we do naturally, don't we? But how can we create a conversation about that that's okay? Come talk to us if you feel there's an issue, don't let it fester. How can we talk about somebody's running up and down the street because they're feeling stressed? How do we assure them that we've got that? How do we reduce that? How do we create confidence with our communities so that actually they feel part of that establishment, I suppose, that it feels part of their community? And I think that's how we want to build. So I think we had to do quite a bit of engagement around Skylarks, which I think has been really positive. We know as we step to open that we will do the same, and we'll create some really good connection with the people that work there and the children that work there, that live there. We've had some conversations, I think, about Hatfield Water Park, and I think that was a bit of miscommunication because people just thought it was going to be around adults. And we talked that through about saying, actually, it might be that we use it for some of our young people who are accompanied asylum seekers, and we are looking at a bit of a bespoke offer, but that isn't necessarily what we're always going to utilise that for, and how can we create and be part of that community? So that's the way that we look at it. We will always listen to residents and look at what people are saying and look at whether we can work together to mitigate that risk. But the other bit that I sit at is saying, I don't want my young people to live in a place where they can't be part of that community. So if we can't break that barrier down, then we have to look really carefully, don't we? Because that might not be the right place and time. But I am always looking for a nudge, and that doesn't mean that I might not come back and try that again if it's a good place and the right connections for our young people. So, yeah, just need to be tenacious sometimes. Sorry. Yeah, but that's what I would say, Councillor Hampshire. I think it's about how we engage, how we're clear about what the offer is, how we support young people, how we will support residents to feel that they can come and talk to us about what's worrying. Really good example I'm going to give is we had a situation where I worked in my previous authority where one of the residents was really struggling with one of our young people. She came and talked to the manager about it, quite frustrated. They had a conversation with the young person that was felt to be causing some of the ruction. Out of his own money, he bought her a card and some flowers, went round and took them round. It just opened up a different way. We didn't need to nudge that too much. That young person wanted to. But because we got good communication, they felt they could approach us. It just created a connection that was lovely. But that's what we aim to do. It's about listening and looking at, are these real objections, or do we just need to be clear about what we're going to offer and how we support?
Yeah, thank you for that. And I suppose that's where something like the Choose Kindness movement comes in. And, you know, I'd love to see Doncaster be known as the kind city. But really appreciate...
And it's by no means a criticism with what you just said, but I think some residents within Doncaster need to understand, and same as Leanne said, that these kids aren't nasty kids. They need a chance, and they need people to speak to them. There used to be, where I live, there's a park across from us. One lad was causing a lot of hassle in there. And I went in there as part of the friends group, spoke to this kid. It ended up, it were over a few weeks. He ended up, and I were amazed that he ended up, he said, Steve, if I've got a problem, can I come to you? I said, absolutely, mate, absolutely, whenever you want. And he never did, but every time he walked past, he waved. And I thought, we've nailed it here. We've got you in Donny. But I just wanted to add that.
Thank you. And thank you, Rebecca, for that. We'll give your voice a rest now. And thanks to the young advisors as well. We'll go to recommendations. So the panel is asked to note the report and that the actions contained in the report is, the report to safely reduce demand and ensure best value linked to spend across children's social care is understood. Does the panel feel that they have been able to give open consideration to the information provided, and do members, what's the end bit to it? It just stops there. Do members...
Do we approve it?
Well, you have to say, yeah, do we approve it?
Accept, yeah.
Do we accept the recommendation? We've got a couple more recommendations that I'd like to add. I think we've spoke about one of them, which is trying to provide members with data ward by ward wherever possible. So that's something we're going to look deeper into. And just one that I don't know if panel members will agree with me, but I would like to sort of say, can we investigate if we can provide more PA visits than just the 8-week sort of requirement, which is just the requirement by law. I personally would like to see that halved, so it's every 4 weeks. So I just think it's a long time in between, and maybe a minimum time that is spent with that young person as well. So I think, are they okay recommendations? Does anybody else want to add any more recommendations? Yep, yep.
What I'm going to say is if we want to offer that level of visiting, we're looking at a significant resource being invested in our leaving care. So I think what I need to do, Councillor Hempshaw, is look at what we're currently offering a bit of a breakdown about how do we give you assurance about what does the average kind of visit look like, what does it feel like, what's the other stuff, what's the ancillary stuff that might also be happening for that young person, because there are other contacts. It isn't just a home visit, there might be keep in touch sessions and things like that. But I absolutely take on board that the challenge you're asking us is, what's the gap and what would it take to look at and how do we manage some of that? So yeah, I'm absolutely up for the challenge, but I'm just really mindful that in order to do that for the amount of care leavers that we've got in our system, that's a significant resource. So we just need to think a bit about proposals. So maybe what I can do is give some assurance, look at some proposals about how we can maximise that for the young adults that are requesting that and how we shape some of that, but also some assurance about what we're going to put in place for the future. How can we grow to that? Is that achievable? Is that all right? Because as I say, it's quite a big resource ask.
Yeah, thank you. And I think it's important to consider that actually it's the voice of the young person that matters here. And it might be that that young person is not ready for that kind of involvement. We need to work with people and not do things to them. And I think if the requirement is 8 weeks, then I don't think we need to argue with that. But I think you're quite right, Rebecca. I think there's other ways to counter visit, and maybe we can get smarter at accessing other agencies that are involved and use them as a scoring as well. But I think it's crucial to say that actually, if a young person doesn't want to see anybody, then we're not need to make them see somebody every 4 weeks.
So what I'll do is I'll organise to make sure that we do some dip sampling of what visits look like and what that routinely is, and that then we could look at, if we are going to offer something more bespoke for young people where they're asking for it, what that looks like, so that we can encourage staff and give them permission around upping that. I think they do it anyway, but we can make it more explicit. I'm quite happy to do that. And then I think what we maybe want to do as well is think in the future, if that's what we're going to do, how do we get young people's voice represented back here again? Because I think you sometimes hear a group of young people, yeah, that's very small, and we need to think a bit about what does that feel like for the broader. Some of our care leavers have got families, they're in relationships, they're married. Some of them just do not want the same level of contact with us. So I can articulate that better on a bit of a care leaver focus maybe, but absolutely, I appreciate the challenge. I think it's a really good one.
Thank you. I take Councillor Needham's points. Yeah, I just think that we say 8 weeks, but that equates to like 6 visits a year. So, but I'll leave that one with you, thank you. So do we agree with those recommendations? Does anybody want to add any more recommendations? Councillor Anderson?
No, I'm just thinking off the top of my head. So you say there's a lot of care leavers that are happy with 8 weeks and some don't even want that. So I'm just sort of thinking off the top of my head. So doesn't that free up the capacity for ones that do want, you know, say every 2 weeks or 4 weeks or...
And some of those are getting that. So this comes back to the point of you hear a sliver of the voice. I'm going to take away that reflection and say, how do I make sure that we're getting meaningful voice? Because I think you're quite rightly saying the challenge that we're hearing is young people would like more. I want that to be really clear about, is that more PA time? Why do we want more PA time? And is there other stuff that I can do in the system that is, for those that need the PA time, that's brilliant. But for those that are coming to the PA because actually other bits of the system aren't working for them, that's another route that I can look at to free up PA time. So it is about those young people that absolutely need and want that additional support. Thank you.
Brilliant, thank you for that. I appreciate, Rebecca, that all what you've said today. Thank you for that. So, Christine, do we need to look at the overview and scrutiny work plan? 'Cause I think we've covered recommendations.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, it's just very quickly, as usual, the work plan has been circulated, but we've got to that time of year when we're at the end of the civic year, and you'll start to look at your work planning coming up in the next couple of months. So if there's anything that members are particularly interested in, if you could let myself, Caroline Martin, the Chair, Vice Chair know, and then we can start giving consideration to that with the directors and assistant directors in the next civic year. Thank you, Chair.
Right, so thank you everybody for attending today. I'll close the meeting. Thank you.